Guys, welcome to my channel. Thank you for clicking on the video. If you're watching this, you're either considering buying or you have completed yourself and just want to compare your thoughts to others. So here are mine. I've just seen the credits roll on the last Berserker Khazan, and it took me about 66 hours. And I think, like most people who have played this game, did not expect it to be as good as it is and as long as it is. People's playtimes will vary. It's a very challenging game. The two main topic of conversations seem to be around the difficulty and the playtime required to see it through to completion. I guess rightfully so. They both took me by surprise, and we will definitely touch on that, and I will share my thoughts and opinions. But first I want to go over just a couple of points, things I liked, things I didn't like, and yeah, let's just jump in. So the game is level based, and that for me isn't at all a negative. I'm putting this as a positive. And in a world where we have dozens of huge, vast open world games, I personally found it refreshing just to have a game where you choose a mission, it has a start, it has an end, and when you finished it, you know how many collectibles you missed, what have you. And yeah, I don't hold that against the game at all. It feels old school. It is a double A game. It does have an older game feel to it in terms of, I guess, its presentation and feel and some of the decisions they made, like making it level based. But I mean it in the best way. You know, it's got that Xbox 360 feel, which we think we all know was a peak time for gaming. Visually, the levels didn't blow me away. There's a dark, kind of gritty, almost filter-like over all of it. There's no ledge you stand on and you see this jaw-dropping vista of a backdrop. You know, there's none of that. It's kind of, I guess, from a developer point of view, like I said, it is a AA game. It's just kind of fogged out. And you visit places like castles, forests, snowy, peaky areas, but none of it particularly stands out. And eventually it kind of doesn't matter what the level looks like, because you just progressing through the levels and reaching the bosses is what you kind of care about. And yeah, in my mind, there are bosses that stand out, there are armor sets that stand out, there are moves you do that stand out and are very memorable, but the levels, none of them. I couldn't pinpoint a single level or section of the game where I was like, God, yeah, that was a good level. So yeah, when I say levels, they aren't just linear. Exploration is rewarded to I'd say, perfect amount. You find yourself questioning every little route. You don't want to miss something, because the collectibles aren't just a number. They benefit you by being able to buy additional stuff or leveling up your character. The loot that does drop, and I like this, it's random, and the affixes within the armor or weapons are also random, which gives it that kind of Diablo-esque, you know, loot drop feel to it. You can re-roll your affixes at a character within the hub area. So within the armor that you can equip, there are sets. So head, body, gauntlet, legs, and depending on how many of each armor set gives you additional stat buffs. And that gave the game an addictive, almost like little side meta, because if there was an armor set that benefited your playstyle and you had 3 of the 5 pieces, you were always kind of hoping for that drop or looking for the pieces so you'd be able to then go and craft it at the hub world. And the best armors required craftable items that dropped from a specific bosses. So you could go and farm that boss and hope the items drop. You could find them in the world, or eventually there's a character in the hub world who you could buy them off, basically. And those tended to be the best armors, the ones that required boss parts to be able to craft them. And it just made this, like, gave you a goal, gave you a reason to craft certain things. And yeah, I liked the way they did weapon and armor drops. Now, as for weapons, there are 3 weapon types. You have your dual wield, you have your heavy sword, and your spear. I quite quickly lent into the spear. Each weapon type, I know, is only 3. It doesn't sound like a lot, but each weapon type has its own completely in-depth, surprisingly in-depth skill tree. Now, there are good and bad points to this. You can change what weapon type you use at any time. They all randomly drop. You can chop and change whenever you like, but of course you're allocating skill points into these skill trees. Now, you don't want to spread yourself thin across all three, so it's better to double down on one you feel fits your playstyle and then go for an armor set which benefits that weapon type. You know, there are some armor sets clearly that want you to use that type of weapon with that armor style. So what ends up happening is you very much progress through this skill tree. For, let's say, me, the spear, I'm getting armor sets which massively benefit me using a spear, and although you can get another armor set or you can reallocate those skill points for free and very easily, because the weapon styles play so differently, it feels like a huge change. It feels like you're starting again. You know, you're starting from scratch with a weapon you don't know how to use. A while you might not be very good with, and again, this game's challenging. So some people might have chop and changed as much as I changed pants, but I felt like it was just more of a ball ache. The option's there to change, but it felt like more of a ball ache for me to strip my skill points, put them into a new weapon class, you know, go for then new different armor sets. So I stuck with the spear for about 80% of the game. And there were parts, started to feel the fatigue of using one weapon essentially. But because the game is so challenging, and because I became so knowledgeable of that class and the moves and the skills via the skill tree, I felt like it was just safe to just stay. So there's good and bad to that. The obvious star of the show is the combat. It is incredible. For anything I've said about level visuals and backdrops, if not doing all that stuff meant they had more time to perfect the combat, then you know, I wouldn't have them do it any other way, because it is precise, it is fast, it is visually stunning and has flair, and it just works perfectly. It's what you would expect from any Souls game. You have a health bar, they have a health bar, you have stamina, they have stamina. Depleting their stamina means you can do what they call a brutal attack. Because of how fast paced it is, and perfect dodges, perfect blocks at just the right time are crucial, I'd say, to defeating bosses, getting the upper hand, and just being able to be good at the game. When you do finally suss a boss and his attack patterns, and you're perfectly parrying after having him wipe you in 20 seconds for the first time you walked in, it just feels incredible. It almost becomes a rhythm-based game. So you're not. And you're probably one of the people that are saying it's too hard, but... So let's jump into difficulty. Now we've touched on it. It is heavily debated online whether it is too hard. Now I entered this as someone who... I'm not a Souls veteran. I've never completed a Souls game in my life. And I know that's shocking for some people to hear. But if you check out other videos I've made, I'm currently playing through Demon Souls for the first time. So I didn't have this knowledge of how Souls games played, and I've managed to complete it. It's definitely challenging, and I think you can have two very different experiences with this game. Now, before every boss battle, you can use one of your currencies to summon a Spirit of Advocacy, which is essentially a little helper. I think I've not played Elden Ring, I know, but I believe it's akin to something called summons within that. Now, the hardcore community shun this, saying, you know, it's cheating. The other half of the community say, well, it's in the game for a reason, so why make it harder on yourself? And I can see both sides, but I used them for most of the game, not all, and I think you can have two very different experiences whether you use them or not, because they can entirely distract a boss while you absolutely plow his back doors. So yeah, you know, if you're not progressing and you think the game's too hard but you're refusing to use an assistance within the game, then I don't know what to say to you. But the bosses, some of them, and it's not all, there's some I beat in literally 2 or 3 attempts. And then there's some that took around 20. And I know people who it took a lot more. And I think people who are Souls veterans struggle with is, like I mentioned, how the weapons and armor are all very random drops. All the affixes are randomly generated, so there's no god pieces. There's no boss where if you go and get this item, you're going to have a hell of an easier time. There's none of that. You make the best build you can, suit your playstyle, you enter a boss, he smacks the shit out of you for a while, and you have to learn his attack patterns. You have to get good at parrying, dodging, and I think that's what's different. I think that's what's setting people apart. It's very reflex heavy. You know, if you're slow with your hands and your brain and you're tired from work, you're gonna struggle. And I know it's a very cheesy, overused saying, but you do have to get good with this game, you know? You can't just go and get this shield which gives you 90% fire resistance to a boss that's using fire. There's none of that, you know? And even when you're dying, I think they were generous with the spawn points. You know, bosses, you spawn outside the door. It really doesn't take long to jump back in. The levels themselves, I think, are a polar opposite. I think they were too easy. You know, the bosses are incredible spikes in difficulty. There are things called elite enemies, which some of them took more attempts than some of the bosses. And they're just elite enemies that once you beat them, even if you die, they're not going to respawn there, and they tend to drop some good loot. But yeah, I found levels very easy and were just enjoyable to play. And then you will reach these bosses and they will whoop your ass for hours, some of them. And it just seems like there was quite a stark contrast. But not necessarily a bad thing, you know. It's almost like you power up and find things in the levels, and then the bosses are kind of the actual game. That's what it felt like. The second hot topic, people are saying it's way too long. Now, I did not expect it to be this long. I bought the deluxe edition to jump in 3 days early, thinking I was going to bang this out in a few days, week, and make a review video. You can probably tell by the date I'm uploading this video that did not happen. I did not think it was going to be close to 70 hours. I personally really enjoyed the game. There were maybe like 2/3 of the way through I felt a little fatigue kick in, but then as I was getting towards the end of the game, I felt like I was enjoying it as much as I was at the start of the game. I think you really fine-tune your build, the weapon type you've chose to go for, and I felt overpowered towards the end in terms of definitely within the levels. Like I said, they were easy. The final boss, which I've seen a lot of people just say is game-breaking, wasn't even the boss that I died the most to. And I think that's just because I had such a solid understanding of the game at that point and my build that it just took learning his attacks. But I think it wouldn't have harmed the game and would have probably, for the masses, had a more positive experience as a whole if it was maybe 25% shorter. Because there are main missions and there are side missions. Now, the side missions are obviously completely optional. But given how hard the game is, I personally was compelled to always do them because one, they drop weirdly some of the best loot, and amount of loot was from the side missions, and two, it was just another way to level up, ready for that next grueling boss. But the side missions were always the main missions tweaked. A different weather system, or you're running it from a different angle with certain bits that were open that are now blocked off. And the worst part really is if there was a boss you particularly hated and you beat them and you were like, oh god, I'm never doing that again. They just whacked them into a side mission at some point. Like 20 hours later, that boss you hated and dreaded is now back in a spectral form or just reskinned. But the muscle memory's there, and you end up beating them far quicker than you did the first time you fought them, obviously. But, you know, a lot of the side stuff is recycled stuff. And again, I enjoyed the game, so I personally didn't think, oh, this is a complete waste of time. But it wouldn't have harmed the game to make it a little shorter, and maybe, you know, who knows what they could have done with that time they put into that extra content. But it's a long game, that's what I'm saying. It's a long game. I know somebody, his playtime's in the triple figures now, and he hasn't completed it. Just know, going into it, yeah, it's going to take a little bit of your time. But it's a good time. All being said, do I recommend you play this game? Absolutely yes. Once it ended, I was like, you know, my mind was, what a game. That's what I thought, what a game. Start to finish. It isn't perfect. It isn't a AAA game. It's yet Another AA game, smashing it out the park, showing that you can throw enough money and shit at the biggest project in the world and players will just think this is meh. Or you can have a smaller studio with a smaller budget who make a game that is incredible. Yeah, I absolutely recommend anyone plays it. But no, it's no merry-go-round. It's hard. Some people are saying it's the hardest Souls game. So again, I don't have the comparison for that. Mentally, I've given it a 9. I'm going to say 8.5. I'm going to say 8.5. No, I'm not. I'm going to say 9. I'm going to give it a 9. I'm going to give it a 9. It does have New Game Plus. But because of how long it is and how much blood, sweat, and tears I've put into it, I am not going to be jumping into that anytime soon. That's a future thing. But if you've made it to the end, guys, I really appreciate you watching it. Consider subscribing to the channel. I'm a small channel. I'm pretty new to this. Please give the video a like. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next one. The next one, in fact, is I'm going to be ranking every single boss based solely off how many attempts it took for me to beat them. So if that's something you want to see, again, subscribe. And I hope to see you there.